My name is Shanna Siegel. I am the managing partner at Wanderpolo Siegel, and some of you may know us. We've been in Montclair for many years with my former partner and founder, Mary Wanderpolo, who has passed on, and I've taken over the reins. And we actually moved. We needed more space. We're actually now located in Bloomfield. So if you were looking for us, that's where we are, but just up the road. I did bring some materials here that are not directly related to what we're going to talk about today. But if you have questions or issues with elder law more generally, these are some of the things that these may be helpful to you. So I want to just give a very, very broad overview of some of the residential options that are out there and some kind of trends and thinking about trends for the future in terms of what may be coming down the pike and how we as a community may want to encourage these things coming down the pike. I know that in Montclair that's a major initiative. I know that many of you are probably involved in those initiatives. But I really just want to give a brief intro of it, and then I'm going to open up for questions, not just relating to housing issues. If you have long-term care issues, if you have public benefits issues, things that you think, caregiver care issues, anything that you think would be of use to other people, and not just to yourself, I'm happy to answer them. And then if you have, very specific issues, I'll stick around for a little while and we can talk. Okay? Sound good? All right, can everybody hear me? Because I'm not using it. Okay, great. Because this is just for him. Okay, so housing. So how many of you here are living in your own traditional home that you have been in for many, many years? Okay, almost everyone. Okay. Do we have people in apartments? A couple. And how do we have people in some type of senior living? No one. Okay, so that's interesting. Interesting for my point, because 95% of seniors, and I think that's even low, want to remain in their homes as they age and as they develop care needs. Nobody says, oh, what I really want is to go live at Cedar Crest down the road, or even less, want to go live at, the nursing home down the road, right? That's not what most of us want. Although I do. I want to go live at Cedar Crest because they've got a lot of stuff there. But anyway, but most people don't feel that way, okay? And so the question is, how do we make that happen? How do we make it so that everybody can remain in their home for the duration of their lives in the setting that they want to be? As all of you know, I'm not telling you anything new, we have a huge booming population of seniors, right? So we have over 81 million seniors by the year 2040. So this issue is just going to increase, right? So in the late 80s and in the 90s, people thought they had these issues solved. They built over 55 communities. They built assisted livings. They built these things called CCRCs, which are like what someplace like Cedar Crest is, and then there are some other facilities around, which are, you come in independently, you pay one price, and then you can continue on and move along and in some sense age in place, although you're not in your apartment, you're moving from apartment to a facility, but you're on the same campus. And so a lot of policy people and entrepreneurs thought, okay, great, we got the senior housing thing fixed, right? Well, did it work? Does everybody love those options? Not so much. They found out, you guys don't want to go live in an over 55 community. It doesn't appeal to you. You want to live in the home that you have lived in your whole lives. And that I don't want to go to that CCRC because you know who lives there? Old people. Yes, I don't want to be where the old people are, right? I want to live in my community with, my neighbors and be able to see trick-or-treaters and, garden and all of those things. So although certainly there's a place for those communities, they did not solve the senior housing issue. So the question is, what what do we have? What are some of the things that we have to look at? Well, you know, I guess the first question is, why didn't it solve it? Well, we talked about some of that, right? We laughed about not wanting to be where the old people are. There's also an issue of a lot of times when you end up in, with the way our settings are now, which is you have traditional homes, whether they be apartments or single-family homes, and then you have nursing homes, you end up with this real situation of under or over care, okay? So either you don't have enough care and people are kind of making do without care or with very limited care because they don't want to leave, or people are forced into really more care than they need, okay? Most of the people, you walk into a nursing home, they don't need to be there. Why are they there? Because that's what Medicaid covers. Okay, so we have this real problem that we haven't found a way to solve. Now, in New Jersey, policymakers thought that they were going to solve this problem by adjusting the Medicaid system. So there is a program called MLTSS. It's Managed Long-Term Services and Support. And the idea of it was to allow more people to remain at home and to receive care at home. But guess what? It has not been a wild success. So why hasn't it been a success? Well, for two reasons. One is it doesn't start early enough. So you don't qualify for it until you need a very, very heavy level of care. You need to need assistance with 3 activities of daily living. Those are your very basic activities. You know, you can't feed yourself, you can't bathe yourself, you can't get around, you have mobility, serious mobility issues. You need to have 3 of those. Well, most of the people who need care in their home, that's not where they are. They just need a little bit of help, right? So Medicaid isn't solving that problem. The other issue is if you do meet that criteria, then it only provides up to about 40 hours a week of care. Well, you know, you have somebody who's home with dementia, or you have somebody who has who really can't care for themselves, 40 hours a week isn't going to do it. Certainly not if they're living alone. So we still see people ending up going from home where they want to be into a facility in order to get the care that they need. So haven't solved those problems. So what are some of the things that people have come up with in terms of being able to address these issues? Well, some of the ideas that have come over the years, I just want to kind of touch on. There's a number of housing options that people have tried with varying success. And one of these is something called cottages, which, you know, is like if you kind of an offshoot of having an in-law suite, right? You ever seen pods? Heard of senior pods? Okay, this idea of having a separate building or a separate living arrangement right on the same property where the family member is. So that's one thing that people have considered. Doesn't necessarily solve the safety issues and the care issues, but people are getting inventive in terms of integrating technology with this. So for instance, there's a lot of things that can be done. Monitors to put on to see if a refrigerator has been opened, a chair is being sat in, you know, is someone in their bed or are they out of their bed, so that you can get a sense of safety issues. You know, no technology is going to replace a person, you know, and the care of a person. But if you've got, you know, I had a client who lived in an apartment in Jersey City. He and his mom had apartments next door. He went to work during the day. She had kind of early dementia, and he had a monitoring system set up so that he could get a sense of was she safe during the day, and he would check in. And you know what? She had some care. He went over in the morning and provided some care. He came back in the evening, provided some care, and that worked for a while, okay? So something like that, it's not going to address all issues, but it may work for some people for an interim period and allow somebody to be at home where they otherwise had some safety issues and might not be able to be at home. So that's one possibility. Is anyone familiar with NORCs? What a NORC is? Okay, so naturally occurring retirement community. And that started actually in New York. High-rise building, okay? A high-rise building this was actually a union building. So there was one of the first ones is called Penn South. And this was a place where a lot of workers were there, and as they aged, it was a naturally occurring older population. And these individuals who, came from a union background, they organized, right? Something they were used to doing, and they developed a senior community. They went out and got supportive services, they got grants. So there was a lot that you can learn from kind of what that model is, and it's occurred other places. Think about in Montclair. We do have some apartment buildings that one might call NORCs, right? They have become kind of de facto senior buildings, right? Now, they don't have necessarily the services in them, okay? They don't have a social worker on staff. They don't have a lot of the other supportive services that some of these others have, but that's a way to go, right? You have a building that has become senior-oriented, and if you can wrap around services, which is what some of these NORCs are, in New York they have, it's called NSSP, so it's senior support services in the NORCs, and these are a really full array of wraparound services which will allow these individuals who are residing there to be able to be involved to figure out what services they need and how to bring them to them in the community, okay? You see that in like Federation Housing and some of the other senior buildings that they're starting to bring in more services so people can stay there. There's another option that we've seen, which is villages, okay? So the first village was in Beacon Hill in Massachusetts, and that was kind of like, again, a membership-oriented, very grassroots program where the neighbors basically got together and said, what do we need? What would improve our lives? And so they brought in, they got special subscription rates, and they would get buses to go to programs, and they would have handymen who gave discounts to the people who were in the community, that kind of thing, okay? So not necessarily intense level of services, but some kind of social, recreational services to try and to enhance people's lives, all right? Again, that's not gonna solve our care issues, but if you can pair it with some support services, it builds community. What is the one thing when you see individuals who are struggling at home, a lot of time they're isolated, they don't have that community. So being able to have that community support is something that's, can really be very useful. And I think it's a big part of what Katie and this group does, right? That's the whole idea, is to bring supportive services in to be able to, respond to what your needs are. Co-housing, collaborative housing, anyone familiar with that option? So that's almost like a kibbutz, okay? So the idea is you have individual living situations, okay? So people have kind of small homes, would be really well suited to that kind of tiny home idea, right? So you have smaller homes, not these big homes that we have here in Montclair. And then a common facility. So there might be a common kitchen and rec room, okay? You could certainly do something like this in some, you can reconfigure housing that's here to meet this kind of role. You almost have that someplace like, what's the property on Christopher Street? Where people have their individual units, but then they come together for their housing. Similar kind for their meals and things. So similar idea that you have independent space, common facility, and some support services then out of that. So when we talk about kind of various ideas that are out there, and we do have other types of facilities we have in Montclair. So we have Jackie from Horizon Manor here. So not not an assisted living, not a nursing home, but providing some support to people. We have the Montclair Inn. We have, a variety of kind of halfway in between nursing homes and traditional living situations, traditional independent living, and then, an assisted living or a nursing home, that kind of middle ground. But in terms of looking at, okay, how do we move this forward? How do we bring the support behind it? And, I don't think this will be news to anyone, but just kind of thinking about what these ideas are. Obviously, your involvement, okay? So you can't reform a situation. You can't bring, figure out what individuals' needs are without talking to them, right? So we need stakeholder involvement. We need public-private partnerships. So we really need to work with for-profit entities, nonprofit entities, and government to kind of figure out how to bring new housing options in. Family caregivers. So right now, family caregivers are really taking the brunt of this, and they're how so many people are able to live at home. We talk about how so many people are going into facilities. It's actually unbelievable what percentage are not. And how is that? It's because they have family members who are providing care for them. But those family members are completely overwhelmed. They're not getting the support they need. They're not getting the training. And they're not even really getting the public policy support. We have some things that were built into the Medicaid system to give them some support, and they're really being slashed and eliminated. So what we need to be doing is the opposite. We really need to give these family members the tools and the support that they need to be able to provide their loved ones care, because they can't do it 24/7, right? So we need to reward them instead of punishing them for providing that care. Care coordination, I think it's important anytime you're looking at bringing services into a senior building, an apartment building, or a community, that the most important thing is for there to be a care coordination piece, because what we find is people get individual services, but they're not getting the services that they need, and the services aren't talking to each other. So they're not seeing how people are slipping through the cracks, and then you just see a decline. We talked about MLTSS. I think that it has real promise of paying for care for individuals in the home, but they have to respond to what people's needs are, how much care they need, the types of support services that they need, because it's not just about care. Some people, it's just because they don't have transportation issues. Sometimes it's, because they need accessibility in their home. They're not able to get around, modification issues. You know how many people that I've had as clients who have had to move just because, their homes, they live in these old, 3 and 4 story homes in Montclair, and they just can't get around. And they're generally too narrow to be able to put in, those wheelchair lifts and that kind of thing. So, being able to respond to the needs of what the people are. I talked a little bit about technology, a little bit about state and federal collaboration. Federal government needs to take this on. They just really hello, this is, it's like we're forgetting. And of course, now's the time for that to happen, right? No, that's clearly not going to happen. But if we were talking, a year ago, I would be saying how the importance of not hiding under our desks. We have to realize that whether we like it or not, this is happening. There is this huge avalanche of seniors who are going to have needs, and we can't just ignore it. We have to respond to it. We have to be proactive and develop an appropriate response, so that we don't end up just sending people to facilities when they don't need it. So I think, there are certainly other countries, and there are some states that are aggressively responding to this and developing plans and doing, I know that Montclair is doing work with livable communities, but that's got to be, every community has got to be working on how do we make our, more livable communities for seniors. Just want to touch on two facility-based things that are happening, which is the Eden and green homes. I don't know if you're familiar with those concepts, but it's basically for people who do have facility-level needs, making it the most home-like environment. So green homes, we have one here at Green Hill, and it is just a very innovative service delivery in that basically nursing home level of care is being provided in large homes. They're have huge family rooms, kitchens, individual rooms, but meals can be provided 24 hours a day whenever the senior wants it. You can go out and have a snack. It's much more personalized level of care. Not that I'm endorsing Green Hill, but just the type of program that it is kind of, I think, where we need to be going. So.
How many people would be living in that situation?
I think there's 10 people in a green home, something like that, okay? And then there's a caregiver who is providing all of that care, stays with that group.
Like a house mother?
Kind of, yeah. Okay, so that's green homes. Eden is more a concept of patient-centered care, and trying to make a facility much more community-oriented. So, like, there are places, a lot of places in Europe have like villages where there is a store. There's a general store. There's all of the a mail, post office box, all of those things in a facility. So it's like you're in a community. It still feels like home. The kitchen, it's like a diner with like a drive-up window. When you come up and you order whatever you want, it's just a very much more community-oriented feeling than kind of the hospital feel that you get if you go into many facilities here. So we have a lot to learn. There is innovation happening, but it's happening slowly, and I think we really need to learn from our European counterparts and figure out where we're going. All right, I'm going to stop now and open up for questions. Again, it can be on these issues or it can be on anything else that you want to know about.
Speaking of Montclair Inn, the bathroom facilities, I think it's down the hall. It's not near your rooms at all. And that's a addition to it.
Yes, and again, different places have different options. Some where you have your own bathroom.
People, that's not that good.
Yes, yep. No, I hear you. It is, yes. It's tiny. Yep, no, absolutely. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. Can you
Expand a little bit more about the MLTS or MTLSS?
Okay.
How do you access that? And
All right.
what are the trouble with federal programs is that they're always one size fits all. So
MLTSS is a Medicaid program, okay? So you have to be Medicaid eligible. So I'm going to guess that most of the people in this room, if not everybody in this room, is not Medicaid eligible. Doesn't mean that you might not be. It means you basically have no funds left unless you are in a couple. If you're in a couple, you will be eligible when you have, it could be up to $120,000. So if you're in a couple, you could be up to $120,000, and you're owning your home, right? You can own your homes, but if you're a single individual, you really have to have almost no money in the bank. So you're not eligible until you're down to under $2,000. Yeah. So, right, it's Medicaid. Well, right. But if there were an individual who was eligible for that, okay, so typically you might see somebody who has spent their assets on care at home, okay, they've had a home care person, they're now looking, they've kind of run through their assets, and now they're looking they want to stay at home. That could be an option, is to do so under MLTSS. The problem is that, besides the financial problem that we talked about, is, you have to need so much assistance, and then you also then they say, well, you need all of this assistance. Oh, but by the way, we're only going to give you 40 hours a week. Well, guess what? If you needed all that assistance, 40 hours is probably not going to work for you. So it works best the way it is right now when you're living with someone, so you're living with your children, or you have a spouse who's a partial caregiver, and you're looking to MLTSS to fill in, to be that additional help. That's basically, it's not what it's meant for, but that's basically the way it functions right now. Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Norma. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Norma.
One of the realities here in Montclair, and many of my friends are going through this, we're in our, mid to late 60s or early 70s, okay? And don't need nursing home assistance or assisted living and don't want to do that. But people want to get rid of their houses. And they want to live in a 55-plus building where they're not screaming kids running around and blah, blah, blah. There is a huge need for this in this town.
Yeah.
And it's like, I saw Gromboski on the street the other day. Is it Gromboski? Is that how I pronounce it? Yeah, so the developer, and he said that the lot, and now this could be a room, I shouldn't probably be saying this, but I am, that the lot next to the Unitarian Church may be turned into a 55-plus apartment, not a condo, but apartment. But there is, people just are like saying there's no place, we want to stay in Montclair.
Right. They don't want to move up to Notch, right? I mean, that's a great community. I know we have an enormous amount.
People, unless you can drive, you're stuck up there, you're abandoned, and people as they get older can't drive at night or other issues happen and they want to give up their cars. You're really stuck up there, and so there's this lack of housing, alternative housing other than houses.
Right.
For, healthy seniors in Montclair.
Yes, I mean, it is part of what,
We have seen a lot of development, right? We've seen a lot of the condos downtown that have come in. Of course, they're very expensive, so that raises a whole nother equity, issue. But even for seniors who, have the means, they're going to sell their homes, they have the means for it, it's not enough yet. Let alone the fact that's going to address a certain issue, but then what happens as those people age? Are they going to be able to stay there? Is anybody going to bring in the services? Because frankly, those types of buildings, even when they don't have services, for people who are fairly well off, don't have to be super rich, but are comfortable, that can work for a very long time, and there's a lot of efficiencies in that. So, you have a building like we have right here by the Bel Air, or we have, the building in Verona. We all know where the buildings are, right? So you have these buildings, and it can be very efficient for home care companies because they can have a bunch of clients in one building, and then they can provide more flexible services. Because one of the things I find with clients is, nobody wants to come for less than 4 hours. And I don't need somebody for 4 hours. I don't want to pay for somebody for 4 hours. I need somebody for an hour or two. Well, if you have 100 seniors in a building, now all of a sudden that home care agency can do that. They can pop back and forth. in the independent apartments next to Daughters of Miriam, there is a lot of that type. It's a great scenario because the aides that are in that building, they'll cover for each other. They'll pop back and forth between. They'll just pop in for 5 minutes to do something for somebody. There's a lot of that kind of informal, which you could never get here in Montclair because there's not that concentration. So it would be a great thing if we could get some, more buildings, more concentration.
The Bel Air House definitely is one. The Roosevelt building, a lot of seniors live in, and those buildings on South Fullerton Avenue,
Right.
a lot of seniors
Right.
live in those buildings, and also Hawthorne Towers.
Right.
Oh my God, it's full. It's
Yeah.
full of seniors.
Absolutely.
So those are places to begin the experiment, perhaps. For me, I live at Valley and Bloom. And it's brand new, it's wonderful. I love the amenities, but it's all 20-somethings. And Valley and Bloom, the new apartments across from the police station. The deal is, I had to have open heart surgery last year to correct a congenital birth defect. And I was hit by a car, and I had to get over all of that. Valley and Bloom, they don't get it, the staff, that I need help carrying Amazon packages upstairs and my dry cleaning.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so I have a cleaning person come once a week, and I let everything accumulate downstairs in the storage room until Donna comes and brings it all upstairs for me. And I'm like, I have to wait.
I mean, that's a perfect example of where, how easy would it be to just have that different mindset, of the little things. When you think about, what? Well, it does have to be paid for, but it's a lot more cost efficient than, something else. So, it's a struggle.
Trust me, as I was recovering last year and basically isolated because I couldn't hardly walk, it was like I'm ready to go into assisted living. I'm only 65, but I had moments where I was just give me assisted living because I can't, at least there'll be people around.
And I've had 60-something-year-old clients in assisted living for exactly those reasons, and then, for a short period of time, and then coming back out to an apartment, but still struggling with the issues that you're struggling with. And of course, I also have disabled clients who are younger, who have those same issues, they don't want to be in an assisted living, but, they need some support, and they want to live independently, and they should be living independently, but how do we provide that support? And it's an issue that nobody has solved, but the problem is, nobody's even really trying to solve it, and that's the problem. Yeah.
No one's mentioning Marion Manor. They're not mentioning any of these places where you can go on a list and your income is based on, it's all based on availability. So
Yes.
there's Marion Manor up in Caldwell. Do you know the place I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
And then there's Mrs. Federici owns another one here in Montclair. It's
Which
by
one?
Hawthorne Towers.
Right.
So these are senior citizen housing.
Right.
The one up in Verona, there's one.
But there's long waiting lists.
Huge waiting.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. There's huge waiting lists, and they don't have necessarily a lot of wraparound services. So I know that in
it's
Bergen,
independent living.
right? So in Bergen County, there's an initiative to have they call it PALS, Portable Assisted Living Services. So they send people into the independent senior housing buildings to provide some of the services so that people can remain in the community. It's typically people whose needs are fairly limited. But, it's only like an initiative in Bergen County. It hasn't expanded out.
You can
So,
also pay for your own maids, your own home health aides at these places too.
of course you can,
And
of course.
die in place. You
Right.
can live there and die there.
You absolutely you can, but A, you need money, and B, a lot of times even with money, it's not necessarily enough by itself, and there can be, on the other hand, you can not need 4 hours a day, but they'll only come for 4 hours. So that can be an issue. Not all of them,
That's why they
certainly,
need
but
you,
many.
because then you come in and help them with the planning, and if they have to
Mm-hmm.
leave, then they've had somebody like you help them with the
Right,
planning.
I
and they
mean-
go on to Daughters of Israel, whatever.
Right, and that's actually part of, we brought a social worker into our practice for that exact reason, to be able to piece together the services, to be able to figure out how they can stay at home, how people can stay at home longer. That is a piece of what we do. Yeah, go ahead.
So, question from Jerome, Commissioner Boyd. The co-housing and villages,
Mm-hmm.
she wants to know if they take people on who really, really need it, or do they have an organization that you can call and say, can you set me up with a particular village?
Yeah, I mean, you could do some research online. There's villages now all over that has expanded. There are villages all over the country. Not a huge amount of them, but there are, they've popped up, it's grown, and there are, in different places in the country. Collaborative housing or co-housing, I know that there's an association, so there's also places where they are throughout the country. But, you can learn more about the model and see if it's something that could potentially be replicated. I know that it has been replicated in communities that are similar to Montclair in the concept of, large traditional single-family houses and how to convert them and or take the land and put that kind of situation there. And let me take her and then we'll come back to you. Yes.
Groups like us, are there any groups with more influence than ours that are exploring this problem, either on the government level, on a profit or non-profit level? It seems from some of the things that you say that a good certified home health care agency would be in a good position to maybe enter the world that you have been alluding to. But I mean, who's doing it other than people like us?
Well, I don't know if you
I can speak to that at all, Katie, if that's something that you're familiar with. But I know that there are people who are doing, I have a friend who is at a foundation that does an enormous amount of work with this and trying to encourage it throughout the country, doing demonstration and studies at certain places so that then they can get funding to be able to do it. So they're really trying to do that collaboration because, you can have all the community groups, and it does have to be very grassroots oriented, but you need the money. And so you need to be able to have someone who can bring all those stakeholders together. So there are foundation and groups that are doing it, but, let's be frank, our current political climate is not exactly, conducive to it. So it's like we've taken how many steps back in the last 9 months? Yeah. So, I think that's, but it was definitely something that was gaining traction and gaining attention, but, now not so much. But of course, there's still those private players who are doing it, the foundations, the nonprofits, so.
I'd say AARP on the national level.
Mm-hmm.
AARP, they do a lot of focus, but they do a lot of focus on a lot of things. So,
A lot of things.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they've been looking at this issue since I worked there 20 years ago. So. Anything else? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, let me take her and then come back. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
to leave, but I wanted to make a commercial before I go because Seniorama, that is sponsored by the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee and AIM, Aging in Montclair, and Lifelong Montclair, and the Department of Senior Services, November 9th at the Salvation Army, 13 Trinity Place. We'll be going into a lot of these issues much more deeply. I mean, you've given us a nice overview.
Exactly, that's all.
But, and that may be the place to start putting together.
There are flyers.
There are flyers. There are flyers up in the, and also for if any of you are caregivers, AIM sponsors a caregivers support group on the first and third Tuesdays at the hub at 1:30 to 2:30, and you are welcome to join the group. Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Thank you, that was great.
All these different facilities, it seems so overwhelming to decide where you're going to go to because you don't know how much it's going to cost. Is it going to be $10,000, $2,000 a month? You know, and then the other question is, do you have someone that can give advice as to if you have a little nest egg that you want to stretch for as long as you can?
Sure, it's a big part of what we do. Yeah. So I have a flyer up here on one piece of what we do is just called life care planning. So asset preservation is a big part of what we do. We do life care planning, which is kind of the integration of all of those issues. So trying to figure out and make a plan for your financial needs, your care needs. What can I give you? No, I'm just going to. Okay. For your financial needs, your care needs, and a piece of that is, you know, kind of navigating those facilities, navigating what options are out there. So we do all of that.
So much for discussion.
And of course, that's all right. It's not a problem. And there are other people who do, you know, that specific piece as well, which we can, you know, pass along.
Quick question for you. What do you think about nowadays? There are a lot of youths, teenagers, people in their 20s that are becoming caregivers. And some people are actually using something that they put together called a caregiving contract, where it helps the carees spend down their funds for Medicaid. Is that, what legal advice would you have for people that want to do that?
You have to be very, very careful, particularly if it's a family member. So again, this gets back to this, hey, let's support family caregivers, except for that Medicaid hates family caregivers because they think that it's all a plan to gift to them. So, caregiver contracts can make sense, can work. You're hiring somebody, you're paying them, but it has to be very well documented. They have to be paying taxes on it. It has to be market rate. There's a million like boxes that you need to check off. So, you know, you really should consult somebody to make sure that you're not going to down the road get into trouble with it.
Get into trouble with one loan for $50 in the 5-year period, so you need an attorney. What you're doing.
Yes.
I have a question about the possibility of building a separate unit on the property for elderly parents.
Accessory dwelling.
Yeah, like accessory dwelling.
Yes.
Is this something that town looked into or?
You know, I meant to look. I don't know if you know what the.
There is an ordinance on the books that allows you to build an accessory dwelling unit, but it's very restrictive right now. It is only for parents. It has to be torn down after the parent leaves or passes away. So that's actually, I'm working with the town planner, the housing commission, and we're trying to revise it so that it's a little bit more usable for people. But there is an ordinance on the book that allows it, but we're trying to make it a little bit more flexible. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Right. You know, the other thing that we're seeing more and more is we're seeing a lot of co-housing and house sharing, and I know that there's a program here in Montclair for that, and we're seeing a lot of, you know, people moving in together, younger people right out of school moving in to a home with seniors to be able to provide them some support, more chore-oriented kind of, so that's something that is kind of exploding here as well. And of course, it's great for both people because nobody can afford to live here. So it's, you know, if you're 20-something and you don't want to pay, you can't pay market rent, it's one, you know, can be really helpful for both parties.
How do you access these services? Is there a central clearinghouse to access information? I know AIM was doing a phone line. But who do you call? I mean, let's say all of a sudden I'm just, I'm sick of living alone. I want to live in a shared house. So who would I call?
Well, there is a group that's doing shared housing, so that there's a phone number for that, and I think the flyer's even over here. some of these other things that are more theoretical and policy oriented, I mean, I would go to AIM first, just kind of, because that's kind of what they're doing. If you're talking about existing services, you know, that is something that we can help you, or care managers can help you. There's people who specialize in advising. The one thing I will tell you, just be a little bit wary, is, you know, those companies, I won't name any by name, but that are referral sources who kind of say, I'm going to take you to see, you know, assisted livings. They can be very good, but they also have contracts with specific facilities, and they're only going to show you who they're contracted with. So you're not really getting an independent view of what's out there. So that can be a bit of an issue, just, you know.
And they're expensive. I did that for my mother, because she was in Florida and I was working full-time,
Right.
and I had to hire a company to.
Well, that's a different, right, so that's a care manager. They have a cost associated with them, but they're independent, versus these other organizations which are free to the family, but you're not necessarily getting the full picture of what your options are. So, you know, you gotta balance that.
This person, I mean, they were worth their weight in gold.
Yes.
Oh my God. The
Care,
best place.
I can say nothing but wonderful things about care managers. It's really a terrific service, and something that a lot of people don't realize the value of. So,
Thank you so much.
no problem.